Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Today you are working as moderator?
Excuse me?
Are you going to work as moderator today?
Well, I don't know. I think the more relaxed dressed.
You make that chair.
Well, the mediator.
Sits, huh? Muzaffar used to sit here.
Well,
really?
And side as well.
Of course, yes.
You're all, mashallah, experienced.
And I understand there's a friend of yours standing outside.
Yes, he's milling around. Yes.
Why doesn't he come in and join us?
Well, the chair is for Ibrahim, who should be coming. Patrick will.
No, who can? Yeah, well, no, I tried to, but he was a bit.
He's a bit shy. He's a little shy at the moment, but inshallah.
So shall we start today's proceedings?
Thank you.
Yes. So they have got some questions they would like to ask Ibrahim.
Have they all been introduced? You have been introduced.
Yes, we.
All of you. Yes.
Imam Sahib's been
Okay.
honoured us.
Let's
It's
proceed with the questions.
Can I just say one thing? The cameras cannot give justice to the lovely aroma that you brought in. Bod Kushpura, they say. It's very, very attractive. I must find the name of the aftershave.
Thank you so much. Yes, please.
First question is, Hazur, is are there any sins which Allah will not forgive?
The only sin which is mentioned in the Holy Quran, which Allah will not forgive, is calling partner to Him, besides Him. Now, this is a very sometimes misunderstood verse, which relates to this, because all the companions, almost entirely, of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah came from an idolatrous society. Also, those who converted to Ibrahimi religion, they also belonged earlier to that society. So this must be taken to mean, as I understand it, that if somebody dies in a state of idolatry, then Allah will not forgive. Because then his expectations should be, as he died, his expectation as if were directed to other sources of mercy than Allah, which do not exist. And that is why repeatedly we read in the Quran a reference to a situation of idolatrous people appearing before God, and someone, Allah directly or someone tells them, all right, seek your help from those whom you call partners beside Allah. It's very logical, understandable.
Yes.
So that is the one sin which is mentioned, Allah will not forgive. Otherwise, all sins can be forgiven if He so pleases. And the principle which Allah mentions in this regard is that His mercy dominates all other attributes. That is overwhelming, overbearing attribute of Allah, which is Rahmaniyat, which dominates all others to the degree that it, in fact, is the origin of all attributes of Allah. So that is why the first attribute mentioned in the Quran, in the beginning of every surah, is Rahman, which in fact is interchangeable with Allah. Regarding other attributes, you do not find referenced in the Quran except for Rabb, which is very close to this. It has reasons to be very close to it, where Allah is substituted by one single attribute as Rahman. Now, as Rahman is. Rahman replaces the word Allah as if it is a personal name. Ar-Rahman, Allam al-Quran. Like this. It is Rahman who taught the Quran. Khalaq al-Insan, Allamahul Bayan. He created man and taught him how to express himself. So this is Ar-Rahman. While Rabb is mentioned to have done this and that, but generally in conjunction with Allah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Yes. But Rahman is a fascinating attribute which precedes all other attributes. That is why Surah Fatiha mentions, please come in, Noonan. How are you? Please come on. Your chair is waiting for you. if it had arms, I could have said with open arms. Now, so we were talking about the attributes of Allah, particularly Rahman, which precedes all attributes before every surah except Surah Tawbah, where this is not mentioned at all. No Bismillah Rahman Rahim is mentioned. But that has reasons of its own. So that means that mercy predominates Allah's attributes and His relationship with all that He has created.
Can I ask you a question after that topic? That, say, in a hypothetical situation, an idol worshipper he dies, and because he's an idol worshipper, he's not forgiven per se, would, say, go to hell and would have like a videotape played of all his sins until he goes through that tortuous path of hell, until finally, as everyone I think does, comes to heaven. Is that exactly what happens in the heaven-like hell state?
You see, on that I should...
Eventually he's forgiven, is that right?
On that I should not venture to further, visualize what may have happened and how it may have happened.
Yeah.
The way you were describing it, it seemed as if you have a concept of a corporal sort of,
Conveyor belt.
material hell, huh?
Yeah.
In which there are corridors, meandering corridors, interesting corridors. You go through one to the other, from one chamber to the other, until you go to the last relieving chamber, and from then on you are released to the open. It's
just as someone explained to me
outside of hell.
That hell is like a very, very slow videotape of all the worst deeds that you've ever done. And you think, oh, on earth did I do that? Why did I do this sin? And that's why there's a hell-like state.
No, but all these things are going to take some spiritual shape. And the feeling of pleasure will be transformed into something which will take a spiritual form. And you will enjoy that not just as subjective feeling, but also an objective something would help you enjoy that. What I mean to say is that here you can enjoy things in two ways. You feel satisfied, deeply satiated, and you're by yourself, and you feel happy. But there are reasons, outside reasons for that. Maybe a glimpse of the beloved one, maybe something you wanted to have for long, you have been yearning for that, and you have received intimation that you are about to have it. Things of that nature. You have satiated yourself by having a hearty meal which you liked. People belonging to different categories enjoy things differently. But there is an outside agent helping. So the question he raises is, or perhaps which arises out of what he says, is that would hell be something entirely subjective, or will it have an outside impression? So also, will heaven be entirely subjective?
Yeah.
Or will it have an outside expression? Now, why do I refer to it as expression? I'll come to that later. Now, according to Hazrat Masih Maud study of the Quran and understanding under divine guidance, what we do here as good deeds, they will have their influence on the soul. And the soul which we have here is soul only comparatively in relation to our body. So it is much rarer than the body we are composed of. And so rare that it becomes untouchable, unreachable, unpalpable, and somehow you know you are, but you don't know where and how. Everyone is like that. So the question the Messenger has raised, and that is the most wonderful thing I've ever read about the life after death, first time from the Masih Maud writings, that this is a soul in relative terms. But if much rarer soul will be born out of that soul. And in the same relative terms, that would appear like a body. So the corporal concept is also in relative terms. And that soul which will develop from the body will be the child of a healthy body, because that soul which would ultimately serve as body would be given birth here out of our good deeds. So it would be a healthy body which would be well capable of enjoying spiritual pleasures, but with some outside help. So that outside help will also take form. That would be an inner expression of the soul, which will take form in the we desire to have something, and we have it. So that soul would love to have attributes of Allah close to itself, to have them manifest to itself in a wonderful way, as it would fall in love with those attributes much more so in the hereafter than here. So those attributes will also take some expression, some form. And in those rare terms, relatively, they would appear to be corresponding to what you desire within. They would be corresponding to what you desire from outside. So they will be complementary to what you like. That is what I understood from the study of Islami Usul ki philosophy, as it is called in Urdu, the philosophy of the teachings of Islam. And it is so fully supported by the verses of the Quran and traditions that it is not just, it cannot be referred to as a philosophy of Hazrat Masih Maud Islam himself. This is the Quranic teaching. That is why it is entitled The Philosophy of the Teachings of the Quran. So the same applies to hell. And that agony which we feel sometimes, we suffer from, it becomes so intense that some people prefer to be burnt alive in fire than to continue to suffer from that agony. How many women you hear of, how many men sometimes, who destroy themselves, who commit suicide by putting them to fire, by igniting, themselves with the help of
dousing themselves with petrol,
etc. And they know this is the feeling of burning is known to everyone. So which means that inner sense of burning sometimes can become so intense that the outside material sense of burning is paled in comparison to that. Now that will also take a form. So what we say, the hell is not corporal or material. We are only speaking in relative terms known to us here on earth. In the hereafter, what form they will take, but they will take some form. And correspondingly, the inner sense of abhorrence against evil would also be enlarged so many times by so many factors that here the pangs of conscience would be just small thing as compared to that realization of what we have done and what we have missed. So that is how the hell is to be created, but it will not be in the same four dimensions as we know them here. They will coexist. Hell and heaven will coexist.
Yeah.
So this means that the form which will appear to be a form would be of some nature of belonging to some dimensions, as they will not interfere with each other, the hell and the heaven, I mean. So that is what the Holy Quran says. Describing Jannah, that is heaven, the Holy Quran says its magnitude is that of the entire universe. The entire universe, and Jannah are one and the same as far as the vastness and magnitude is concerned. When some of his companions heard this, in amazement they inquired, So where the hell would be, O Prophet of Allah? Imagine how forward in time he was, because he was guided by Allah. You never come across any such reference in relation to any other prophet. He said the hell would also occupy the same, but you would not know. It's a fascinating declaration, unbelievable.
Like two parallel universes,
Yes. Coexisting, and one not interfering with the other. Like the waves crossing, hundreds of thousands of waves can occupy the same space, and they do not disturb each other.
No.
So it's a fascinating expression,
My concern,
unbelievable. That's one single expression of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam should wipe out atheism from the doubting Tom's minds, right?
my concern was though that with the people in hell, or that this hell like is there any way can they flick over to the?
Please, yes.
Inshallah, they can flick over to heaven.
You
That's
see,
what I mean.
What do you know? What you say by what do you mean by flicking over? I don't know well, but I'll tell you. I know what the question is.
You know the question that I'm asking.
Of course. Ahmad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Holy Prophet of Islam, once described the final state, the final condition of hell. Ultimately, it would reach that state. And he describes it as a large empty mansion. There is no one to bolt the doors from inside or lock them from out. They bang against each other with the winds that blow across. There is no sound except the banging of the doors, and only one person would be the occupant or the inmate of that hell. The last one, will be left out. And all the rest would have been removed before that time to heaven, ultimately.
A bit like Rudolf Hess.
When?
A bit like Rudolf Hess
In Spandau
when he was
prison,
imprisoned in Spandau.
That's right, yes.
The only prisoner in the whole vast
No,
prison.
it's he like that. He was created after, much after, many centuries. So when you say like that, it means as if this idea was borrowed from him. But it's the other way around.
Yeah, quite. Yeah.
You see? So I don't say he directly borrowed, but this is a natural idea which can be born in one's mind who believes in such things. But anyway, Ahmad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam describes it further by saying that after that he would creep out of that hell, the last man, and the hell will be entirely deserted and abandoned. And then he will creep forward and see as if the boundaries of heaven across. Now, that's all a metaphor, of course.
Yeah.
This should be understood. And then he would request God to please open his little window so that he should know what the wind of heaven is, what blows inside, the breeze is in the heaven. So Allah would have the window open towards him, and he would say, what a wind, what a breeze. Is this heaven? So after a while, he'll say, if this is heavenly breeze, what the heaven would be, could I have a little peep into it? Small opening, I could approach and see what was the cross. So Allah will say, well, yes. You say, gosh, what a thing. I couldn't imagine it to be that beautiful. So after a while, he would be satisfied. For a while, he would be satisfied with just peeping and enjoying the outside view of the heaven. And then he would say, oh God, please, could I have just one step into the hell to see how it feels inside? Yeah. So God, as if it's metaphorically, would laugh and say, come on, my servant, come and enter the heaven. And then the doors would be opened, and that will be the last of this creation. But there will be many other creations. There have been many other creations in the past. This is eternity we are dealing with. So this chapter will be closed, and other chapters will be opening. Maybe somewhere in space, in our dimensions, other prophets will be born and rejected and tormented
You mean we're very blinkered? We think there's only us. There's
Yes,
only this.
yes.
And you said there's other creatures outside,
Of
and
course.
this.
No, but even in the whole universe, when it's wiped out as a whole, then it will be reborn, recreated later on. And by that, maybe by that time we are enjoying otherworldly life, and we have developed enough to to be able to exist as a spiritual entity, which is mentioned in the Holy Quran. But it will take a very long time. Maybe by that time, the whole earth is all wiped out and reverses to that black hole something which engulfs it and destroys everything, and there is nothing less as far as outside view is concerned. And then it would reappear at a later stage.
They make all the same mistakes that we made.
What I mean to say is, as far as the time is concerned, in the sense of the time as we understand here, I mean, maybe it's just possible that as the last man is ultimately entering the heaven, another religion is born here on earth, and Adam is taking over.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So the possibilities are so numerous, I mean, unimaginable, because we are dealing with eternity. Eternity is unimaginable.
I think Said would like to ask you a question now, Hazur.
Yes, please.
Returning to worldly matters, I've got a question from Mr. Kaleem Tahir, studying economics at Birmingham University.
Right.
He says, in one of your addresses, whilst dealing with the subject of Western economic system, Hazur stated that the interest rate is in fact the root cause of inflation.
That's right.
Which is considered to be the biggest enemy by several countries in the light of the havoc it has wreaked in the past to some nations. Yet the above statement is in direct contradiction with the economic theory generally accepted today.
Exactly.
Could Hazur kindly shed some more light on this issue? And he, as a postscript, during his speech, due to the lack of time, Hazur was able to elaborate over this topic.
You see, that book which has been published, that covers this subject quite, if not entirely comprehensively, but it speaks of much more than I was able to say in my speech he's referring to. So I think he attended that speech but did not follow that with the book.
So, yes.
So we should study that book. I know what the economists say about it, but I know also that they are wrong, because repeatedly they have been so disappointed by their experimentations with artificially raised high interest and what followed. You know, that became the downfall of Mrs. Thatcher's government. And the Conservatives have not been able to recover from that, forcible treatment of economy. Economies are not forced. No coercion can be applied to economy. You may think that for the time being you have been able to run away with the measures you take to subjugate economy, but you cannot. It's a free system, entirely a government in its own, and it should be dealt with in accordance with the economic laws created by God. And turning to that, the one law which we read in the Quran is that usury is a fallacy. It does not help you increase your capital, only it creates disorders. Accumulation of economic gains in one particular area of the society does not mean that economically you have benefited. Again, attraction of capital of belonging to other countries through interest rates is also a false measure which does not pay in the long end. Again, an economic boost by exploitation of capital to a degree that it begins to attract to transfer the wealth of poorer countries to richer, more capitalized countries is again a measure of, let's say, not deceit on the part of those who employ it, but a measure of fantasy, which does not appear to be a fantasy. They think it's a real thing, and we can continue with it. But on the whole, what is happening is wealth from some areas, first of all within the country, are removed from certain tiers and levels and shifted gradually to higher levels until they become imbalanced. As such, they cannot survive for long. They are bound to tumble down the top-heavy economic system. Then they are given support by one-sided trade with the comparatively poorer countries, so that their blood is transfused into the richer economy. And this is exactly the opposite of what we have in nature. If somebody is dying of anemia, you don't transfer his blood to the one who is bursting with overmuch, red blood corpuscles. Like instead of having a 15 or 16 normal, sometimes they have 20, number of blood corpuscles. I'm just giving a figure, which is more than 100%. So this is the economic treatment of the rich capitalist countries. To survive, they have to transfer more anemic blood into a wealthier society which is already, over much swelled in veins and arteries with blood and so on. Now, that is what I have explained in the book, but I'll try to be brief about it. The overall world economy becomes unstable. It's bound to become unstable. And within the country, what happens is that you realize too late that what the interest rates, the benefits which the interest rates brought in the beginning were only fake benefits. They were not real. They were just airy. What was happening was something else which these economists, I don't know why, do not understand. I mean, they're highly organized scientific community, the financial experts, etc., and they should be able to at least project into the future and see what we are doing to our future and what is happening in the present. What happens in the present with relation to the future is that such a society as is made rich with the help of capital, again enriched with the help of interest, etc., this society is spending in the present what belongs to the future. And it must continue to do that, or ultimately it will tumble down. This is the aspect which I have tried to clarify in that book, and I think I thought I was quite clear about it, but I'll explain it to you now. What happens is, in a society where capital is, capital is drawn from the general norm of the society, ordinary people, general run of the society, into fewer hands through banks. For the benefit, which is very visible and obvious, of employing that capital to develop industry. Right? Now you develop industry, and let's forget the foreign trade relationship for the time being. You develop industry, and to bring the prices low and to meet the challenges of the competition, you have to adopt certain measures by attracting people's attention and having them more mindful, more conscious of that artificial luxury which is created by the industry. Now, when I say artificial industry, that has to be explained. I know I have not made myself clear, but give me a few minutes and I'll be all right. We can live with enough food, healthy food, decent clothes, decent living. But as these societies, which are supported by capitalism, proceed further, industry cannot survive on just producing the basic needs. It has to produce something more and extra and special to make the life more enjoyable and easier. So they go into the extras of life, which are not the essentials. And gradually, the extras consume more of your produce and income than the mere basic necessities.
Yes.
You see, now if you break down you break up the budget of an ordinary poor English family, you'll be surprised how unreal that budget has become. Because it's not spent on food and comfortable living anymore. It's not spent on holding the whole family together. It is spent on wine, drinking, and having luxurious televisions, etc., and access to such music. It's becoming very costly nowadays. So these extra expenses are a necessity for the industry to survive, and a necessity has become an artificial necessity, artificially created necessity of the people to belong to the same age. They must strive hard to belong to that age. Now, how can they support such costly industry and such costly way of life? Not with the income they earn during a certain period of time. So they have to borrow from the banks again. They have to borrow and get the reward of the labor they have not yet put in. So they transfer their future into present. And it goes on unnoticed for a while, until this is an artificial way of life, until the demand of the banks goes on rising, and there is a stage reached where they cannot lend anymore because they are afraid of total loss of the capital. And then the houses are confiscated and things are proscribed, and a chaos develops in the society whereby everybody feels uncertain. Those who have borrowed and those who have lent, both feel very uneasy about things. Then drastic measures again are taken by the governments. First, measures to boost the economy artificially, and then to keep the economy stable and save it from tottering down or tumbling down. And this is when the crisis begins. And the basic cause always remains to be the capitalism. Such countries must increase their trade with the third world, or third world comparatively poorer countries.
I think this is very true with the American cigarette industry, whereas the government in America are talking of prescribing smoking, as they have done in a large extent.
Yes.
And so the American tobacco magnates are very worried about where their income's going to come from. And so now they're diverting their production to third world countries, and they're using the same techniques for selling those products which have been outlawed in Western nations to hook people and catch people, because there are no restrictions. They're using those same methods to hook people.
The same they are doing to Russia, which is the second world country now. It was the first world country before, and China, everywhere. The American cigarettes are so much in demand in USSR.
It's that brand name again, Marlboros and things like that.
And you know, this is what they do to the pollution. The same policy, the same attitude, the same selfishness is displayed in relation to their attempts to solve their problems, whatever they are. You know, the Americans have solved the problem of increasing pollution by raising the height of chimneys to so many 100 feet that they, they unload the smoke or the filth into a strata of atmosphere where there are strong streams of winds carrying them across America and unloading them into Africa or some other third world country.
No. This is true in Britain, where we've had
Yes.
very tall chimneys. One of the reasons why our pollution has got better, because all of these nitrous fumes were wafted over to the forests of Sweden, who are now suffering from acid rain.
More so
And
in Norway. That is why, the poor queen was treated with,
Contempt.
not content, but says with bad egg treatment was meted out to her. This is the treatment of the poor people, comparatively poor people, with which they try to cure the ills of comparatively healthier society. Bad eggs were thrown on the poor queen so much. She was just a symbol. She didn't deserve that. Bad eggs should have been thrown at the system of usury, at that system which has created that utter selfishness, where selfishness becomes a necessity. This is the problem. Selfishness is no longer a choice with you.
Greed.
There's an English expression of keeping up with the Joneses. It's nothing to do with me or my relatives.
I'm glad you said that, but then you would never have,
And
associated
these
this
Marlboro
with you.
cigarettes,
Yes.
I'm sure that some countries, people who are poor, they think that in a way they are imitating those rich nations,
Yeah.
and if they copy them,
That's right, yes.
they'll live in these luxury
You
apartments.
see, this is the duality of the Muslim world itself. On the one hand, they take pride in abusing the West and the whites and this and that, and raise slogans against those who are siding with the British, while it is the British intelligence which is supporting them and keeping them from total collapse. And in the government policy, they go hand in hand. In the way of life, they adopt the British way of life. They enjoy the Western goods, including the British, but they talk of British agents. Unbelievable how it happens, and they don't see what they're doing. Once I received a report from Kuwait or some country in the vicinity of Kuwait, it is from Sheikhdom, that the propaganda is being carried out against some Ahmadis, that they are British agents. And that is why, there was a danger hanging on their heads that their property will be confiscated and all that. Can you imagine Kuwait or Abu Dhabi doing this? And the chief of the police was a British person, British gentleman, who had a good laugh at it among friends. I said, look at that. I'm investigating whether this man is British agent or not. And of course he poo-pooed the idea, and there was, later on, we approached the higher societies, people higher up in the higher echelon, and they understood the matter. But what I'm saying is they are living a life of duality. It has become a fashion with them to abuse those masters of theirs, which are still the masters but in a different way, and to accept their mastery underhand, and to support their mastery, and to help them gain all their economic ends and objectives privily, without bringing it to the notice of the public, yet to cry wolf at the loudest of their voices. So this is unfortunately, the life of hypocrisy which we are living in.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to turn to Ibrahim now.
Yes, Ibrahim?
Well, my question is more of a question of advice rather than an actual question.
Right.
Recently, I've met an actually convert Muslim, an Irish Muslim,
Right.
who converted to Sufism.
Right.
And I've listened to your tapes on
Sufism.
the Shias
That's
and the Sunnis, but I'm looking for advice on how to open a dialogue with a Sufi.
You see, the Sufism, as I have dealt with, is genuine and also fake, and also, in fact, implanted Sufism. I have spoken at length on this subject during my various addresses and question answer sessions. The most important thing about Sufism is that apparently it began with India from a musician family of Anayat Ullah or Anayat something, and some others who then traveled west, impressing the West with their brand of Sufism, which was helped with music, by music, which was a good instrument to impress the Western mind of that period, until that family of Sufis got settled in America, married into Americans. And from then on, Sufism was totally taken over by the Americans. And from then on, during the First World War, as well as during the Second World War, Sufis played a very pivotal role in spying against the Nazis and other German forces. And so that those Sufi women who played that role, they have become national heroes. Offhand, I don't remember their name, but that will come. They are given some pseudo-names, but in the British society, if I take that name, you will understand what I'm talking about. What was it? Mahatra something or... Anyway.
Matahari?
Matahari, that's right. Matahari and similarly some other characters. They were the daughters of these Sufis. And then Sufism got so close to some European cabinets that in Holland there were one or two Sufi ministers. And then again, strangely, it was also very closely related to Judaism. And American Sufism tried to cultivate the same brand of Sufism into Russia. An attempt was made before the turn of this century to send this Sufi group from America, these musicians, at the time of the Tsars, to go there. It was, I think, the period of Rasputin being at its height. And they approached Moscow and attempted to seek permission to go to the countryside and hold Sufi conferences here and there, but they were very sternly rejected by the Tsarist regime because they knew the game. I mean, they had played the same game, of course, so it was nothing new to them. And they said, go back, nothing of Sufism here. Why? Because they wanted to implant a Sufi sect in Russia whereby they could spy on Russian system of government even before communism, became the government theory. Before that, I'm talking of those days. But the Russians were afraid of Sufism because their brand of Sufism was so different from the one American brand which was being introduced, because it was a militant Sufism. Nowhere else in the world you find Sufism so closely related to militant theories and attitudes as was in Russia. In fact, that Sufism was largely responsible for various rebellious attempts on the part of some Muslim states against the Tsarist rule, and an attempt was made repeatedly to emancipate them from the Tsarist rule, to liberate them from the Tsarist rule. And they were all led by Sufi movements. So they were already very allergic to Sufi, the word Sufi, when they reached and tried to spread this Sufism. And you see most books written on Western brand of Sufism by American authors. They have become so interested in Islamic Sufism, and only that Sufism which we are talking about, of whose the leadership of that Sufism is entirely taken over by the Americans or by some Westerns. There is not a single Oriental Muslim at the helm of Sufi affairs, that Sufism you were talking about.
That's right, because the actual the leader of the Sufism in this country is actually Scottish.
You just again?
He's Scottish. I don't know his name, but apparently he's
I
Scottish.
know, I've seen him on television. And that is why his introduction of Islam as he does it is so jarring. And sometimes one is shocked to see if this is how Islam and Sufism are introduced in the West, what would be the reaction? That may be one of the reasons why Sufism of this brand is supported and popularized, attempted to be popularized. So many innocent people follow such movements without knowing what they are bargaining for. And they are just fed up of the values they have inherited. It is not the love of something which attracts them, but it is the repulsion against something which pushes them apart and to something, in search of something. And that is why they think that Sufism is related with pacifism. And they don't want to indulge in any Islam which has militant views and this and that. So they are naturally drawn towards that brand of Sufism. But to no avail, because it does not have the same Islamic principles governing them. And if it does, they are in some respects even more rigid than the ordinary Muslims belonging to the mainstream Islam. But they employ music freely, they employ tactics of various sorts, which the leader you mentioned also does very freely. And somehow I think consciously or unconsciously they are playing into hands. Allah knows best.
Hazur, I'd like to ask you a question that's come up recently, really, that's come to my mind. You may have seen stickers everywhere for the Khalifa
That's right.
movement.
Especially around here.
On every single lamppost in Birmingham,
Yes.
there was one of these red stickers saying Khalifa movement. If you go in all the Pakistani shops, you'll
You see,
find
nowadays,
posters.
an attempt is being made by certain vested interests to create the authority of caliphate by first making it popular among the masses without showing those who are in fact already named and specified to occupy the post of caliphate as a single board person or as a body of people. That conspiracy is fully supported by certain Muslim countries. And the information I have so far received does not rule out the possibility of Iran taking interest in this, or Libya taking interest in this, or some other countries, but they are fully supported and they are implanted in universities, in Oxford, in Cambridge. Cambridge particularly is becoming a hot seat of their activity, and also at various educational levels, lower levels as well. Now, the idea appeals to every Muslim. There's no doubt about it. Why not return to that glory of caliphate where Ummah was one? So this idea has nothing wrong in it.
No.
But how to achieve it, how to get together under one banner, this is the $7 million question which they never answer and cannot answer.
They're open to join us.
So instead of coming out in the open, those brains which are behind, they are trying a very special, ploy to first popularize the idea of caliphate, then gradually appear as those who were responsible for this propaganda. And
It's a proper advertising campaign.
Yes,
That's what
people, very well organized and
it's a classic
very-
tactic,
but
isn't it?
very,
It's-
very
Yes.
intensively and
Yes.
extensively carried out. Everywhere in Europe and America, you see the stickers appearing. So the people, the masses will be attracted towards this caliphate. And now even among the black Africans, they are consciousness, yes, we must have one single head as our chief, but this idea is supported through other very subtle moves which ordinary man cannot detect. Only recently in Europe, there was a conference held, fully represented by Muslim scholars from all countries and all walks of life. Governments themselves were participating in that, and the idea was that there should be a grand mosque. Maybe a million people could be accommodated there in Europe, which will be constructed with the help of all united.
Perhaps Euro Disney's for sale.
So we'll have one ummah created in Europe. Now, why don't you have the one ummah created in Pakistan first, or Indonesia, or Libya, or Saudi Arabia, etc., etc.? Why Europe for Sufism, Europe for one ummah, Europe for Khilafat, and America, of course?
Yes.
So can't you see, there has to be something behind it.
Yes.
But anyway, during the same conference, some people got up who were blessed with some sense of wisdom by Allah, sense of common sense, I should say. They stood up and said, what sort of unity will you create? The moment you create an imam, appoint an imam, the question will be raised, who would appoint the imam? The one who has financially participated the greatest, he would seek the right, he will appropriate the right of doing that. And then which imam? He said, Hajj, isn't that sufficient? Hajj is already created by Allah. What bigger mosque than the grounds around Mecca do you need? Now, all this was not said, but I'm giving voice to the same, I'm giving expression to the voice in a more comprehensive and more applicable way. This should have been asked, but it was not asked. But why not Hajj? Why is not a caliph created? Because of the... Now, caliph was not mentioned, There, caliph was not mentioned. The movement of caliph, of bringing about caliphate, is moving on a lower plane all over the world. And this movement is to bring the consciousness of unity to the minds of a higher echelon, which is associated with governments and other power groups in the world of Islam. So then there will be an attempt to bring them together and use that clutch system, which will connect through a gear this lower movement with a higher power controlling unit. But anyway, that conference did not succeed because some people were wise enough to see the fallacy of all this, and they stood up and said, and then voices started being raised in their favor. And some representatives of some Muslim countries like North African and others, they said, this is quite right. We must support this. What is the mechanism? What is the purpose of creating such a big mosque? Who will be the imam? How they will be unified? And if you want different imams to start saying prayers simultaneously, or times to be allotted one after the other, I mean, that you will turn that mosque into a laughing stock for the rest of the Europeans. So then it was naturally, ultimately abandoned. But what I'm saying is, movements are being organized; they're not happening.
It's interesting that in Wembley, in July, there is a Khalifa conference where they expect 12,000 people at Wembley Stadium, and they've advertised it as the biggest world gathering of Muslims ever.
You see, I know what sort of gathering it would be, because Ahmadiyyat has a very interesting system of working where you do not have to create any intelligence organization, because those created intelligence organizations always tend ultimately to mislead the central brain, or he employs them to mislead others. But there is a genuine natural system of intelligence existing automatically all over the world, in 140 countries now, where Ahmadis, whatever they see, they report to me. They write innocently, without any, intention.
No malice.
Or no, I'm not talking about malice. I mean, without any intention to mislead me. Of course, they could not, but without themselves realizing why they are doing so. Out of their relationship with me, they have to write something. They say, "This is what happened here. That is what happened here," and so on and so forth. And that piecemeal information all over creates parts of a jigsaw puzzle. When I put them right,
Yes.
they begin to make a clearly understandable shape and design. So that is how I've been receiving information from Sudan, from different countries, from America, where a certain type of people, and they belong only to a certain class of people, who are against certain regimes in power in those countries. They are related to this idea of caliphate. And Pakistan also represented there in one conference held in Sudan. But I was surprised at the naivety of Pakistan government to send a representative there, and he must have been shocked to see that it was not, that conference was not representative of a genuine representation from all over the Muslim countries. It's a class of people who appeared there. So the same would happen to this Ramday conference. You wait and see. When is it going to be held?
August the 8th, I think.
You'll wait and see.
July the 8th, I believe.
As I said, after this propaganda, some faces are going to appear which are nondescript as present. Maybe Wembley conference would be used as a stage for introducing the actors. So we'll see what happens. Okay?
In Ruku 5 of Surah Al-Zumar, where it mentions that Allah takes away the souls of human beings at the time of their death and during their sleep. Hundreds of people have reported at times they find themselves outside their physical bodies, especially at times of great crisis, near death in hospitals. Should we regard it as all imaginary, or could there be any reality in it?
I think there is more evidence for us to just reject it as imaginary or concocted. There is certainly evidence regarding what they refer to as out-of-body experience, OBE. In short, it is it's called in parapsychology. And scientists from different scientific faculties like physics, chemistry, etc., they have been implicated such names as are above any possibility of being involved fraudulently in any such thing. Some of them have also been Nobel laureates. And the results of such studies, which I have read, indicate that there is growing scientific evidence of certain powers endowed to man which have not yet been understood by man, which are not the same powers as we understand as chemical, responding to chemical laws or physical laws, etc., etc. There are some powers which cannot be measured as yet. We don't have sensitive instruments to measure them, yet they exist. And those powers sometimes create certain situations under stresses particularly, which are normally not explainable. And that is why they appear to be bizarre or mysterious. OBE is also, falls into that category, OBE. But this is most certainly true, that we feel out-of-body experience. We have out-of-body experience, which turns out to be true in the light of the following events. I'll come to another interesting point later on, but let me first speak a few more words on this. It does not mean that the soul leaves the body. If the soul leaves the body, then it can never get reattached to it. But the soul does not occupy the same dimensions as the body does. It is something belonging to a different dimension and much wider, as if in space. I don't say in space, but as if in space. So sometimes if it is activated to a degree or excited to a degree that it takes over some functions of the brain and directly, without the help of eye or ears, begins to see or hear, then those experiences can be referred to as out-of-body experiences. And such experiences have an authenticity in religion.
I must say that I had one of those experiences on the night that I became an Ahmadi.
Is that right?
Yes.
Please tell me before we finish this.
Well,
it's very interesting.
From a personal point of view, after I prayed and
Yes.
accepted Allah as a thing that I wanted, I went back to sleep.
Yes.
And then I had the sensation of somehow looking down on my own body, and it was tied by a cord of some sort, and then I floated out of the room, and I floated into a church where this Christian girl had been preaching to me, and I looked down upon her,
Yes.
and then I floated out of the room, and then I went back into my own body.
Yes.
And that was such a vivid experience. It was far more than an ordinary
but
dream.
there was no outside evidence
No.
related to this. But what I'm talking about is a step further. If you had ventured to go to the same church and had seen it immediately after the dream, while the memory was fresh, you might have detected some objects lying in a certain place in a certain style way, which you had witnessed in that out-of-body experience. What I'm going to quote now is an experience by Hazrat Masih Maud al-Islam. Hazrat Masih Maud al-Islam was once writing some book inside his room. In those days, and even now perhaps in Qadian, there is a custom that some sweepers or sweepresses, they come and sweep the courtyards and also the toilets, etc. So he was writing, and suddenly he started seeing outside in the courtyard, as if he was there. And he observed that sweepress to sweep this courtyard and pushing all the dirt and filth and refuse into one corner and not taking it away with her like she should have done. Now, that experience was over, and Masih Maud al-Islam left his pen and papers there, walked out. The sweepers had already left, and exactly in the same corner there was that refuse, litter, still lying down, exactly as he had seen. So as Masih Maud al-Islam quoted this, it does not seem to have a that spiritual type of experience which the prophets have, because it doesn't seem to have any message for the benefit of souls and humanity at large. But one message, of course, there is more to it than you think there is to your bodies and souls. So such experiences have been scientifically recorded and compared with some simultaneously happening experiences, with one difference, that in those experiences ordinary people were involved, but of the similar nature. In these controlled experiences, those people were involved who were known to have some psychic powers, who had experienced some psychic powers in the past, so they recorded them in the presence of those scientists I have been talking about. And the results are surprising. In these experiences, as compared to other natural happenings, the evidence of these people who had no knowledge of what was happening in a certain corner of some place, they observed the things and they remembered things, having seen the way they were happening, and again they tried this experience upon dogs. Some dogs were familiar and very deep, not familiar, but deeply attached to certain people. So they were taken into a sort of tunnel, and the tunnel the dogs had not seen before. But the person on whom they were experimenting, he was familiar with the tunnel. He was told to go and stop, as if concentrate on going out and stopping at certain corner. And in more than one cases, many cases in fact, the dogs after a while became conscious of something, and they started moving towards that corner where he was concentrating on his presence. Now this happened, I don't say so many times in the sense that out of say 50% of that, not at all. But even if it happened 5% times, they experimented the same thing with others, and it did not happen even once, even to 1%. So these meager evidences, but quite indicative of certain things. I'm told that the time is over now, although this meeting is very, very interesting. I feel continuing it. But inshallah we'll meet again.
Inshallah.
And we have many questions left out. Arrange that we meet again and take up from where we left, okay?
Thanks for your time.
Pleasure meeting you. And on your behalf, and my behalf of course, I thank all the viewers, and Allah bless you. We take leave of you. Assalamu alaikum.